Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Ask about that.
Free to proceed, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Max. I'd like to call this virtual regular meeting of the Planning Commission on September 11th, 2020 to order. Mr. Weber, would you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Trunzo.
Here.
Mr. Covington.
Here.
Mr. Hunker.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Ms. Lucier.
Here.
Ms. Matcha.
Here.
Mr. Strange.
Here.
Myself and Mr. Perry.
Here. We have all members of the Planning Commission present, and we have a quorum. And could you please do the verification of meeting notice? Ann?
Hear me now?
Yes, verification of meeting notice, please.
Okay. The agenda was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on September 3rd and was sent out from the portal on September 3rd. That's all I have, Chairman.
Thank you, Ann. Before we start, I'd like to ask that we observe a moment of silence in remembrance of the lives we lost 19 years ago on this day on 9/11, and to also honor our first responders, our brave first responders who ran into harm's way and danger and not away from it. So please join me in observing a moment of silence. Thank you. I'm going to defer until our next meeting consideration of the minutes and move on to the next order of business being correspondence. And do we have any correspondence?
There is no correspondence.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move into old business, which is the comprehensive development plan update, including discussion of next steps. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Debbie for a presentation.
Just 1 minute, I'm getting set up. I'm on that screen share. Can you see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Okay, let me try this one. I did this last time, I believe. How's that?
Yep.
Yeah.
We are.
So you see the title of the slide that you're used to seeing?
Yes.
I have an echo, and if that's going to bother people, people might want to go on mute just while I go through the presentation.
Okay.
As a recommendation. Would you like me to start?
Yes, please, Debbie.
So today we're here to discuss the project update and the next steps as we talked about and where we're at on the comprehensive development plan. Let me do this. There we go. Sorry. So you're familiar with this slide. We're at the project scope. We're still at phase 3. Phase 3 is a long phase. We're working through this plan input and the draft internal document still. I would like to dive down a little bit more into where we're at in that process, as I've been requested to give an update. So what I'm here today to talk to you about is mapping, and then I'd like to go over the schedule. So if this is information that you already know, I apologize. I tried to make it basic, not necessarily just for the Planning Commission, but for the general audience and the public to understand where we've evolved in mapping. And Mike Strange, I hope you really enjoy this because it's going to help us educate everybody on the evolution of mapping and GIS. So what is GIS? It's actually a geographic information system, a computer system, a smart map, system of hardware, software, and procedures. And if you look to the right, it involves hardware, data, software, people, and as you know, everything's an app. Well, as you get more savvy with your phone, as I'm starting to get at my age, I'm still a paper person, you have apps for different things that gets you around. That all actually comes from a collection of data. So I just want to let you know what GIS is and how far we've gone, and what does this have to do with the CDP. So GIS actually digitally represents the real world. It stores locations of geographic features, and it features links to each database. So the data analysis allows you to do a single feature and the system, and the data can be applied to other purposes, and then you can share it. So if you look to the right, we have the real world on the bottom. Then you can do different layers: land usage, elevation, parcels, streets, customers. Now this is going to be new and quite advanced from your last CDP. I can't take credit for this, but I'm excited about it. So for mapping, these are just several different layers, and you can create, you can create your own, but there's resources to go to. I'm not going to read these, but you have aerial, a couple of them. Land use can be used, municipal boundaries. Each one of these builds into something, so you can use as a tool, or a property owner can use as a tool, or a developer. I've got to apologize for being rude. This is Madeline Pushkar. I'm sorry, Madeline.
That's okay.
She's the rotational engineer working on Rehoboth. I believe she's at the last meeting, and she's doing research for Rehoboth until October 1st, when we'll lose her for her next rotation. So I apologize for that.
Debbie, excuse me for interrupting. I don't show your data on my computer screen you're referencing.
Does everybody else see phase 3 mapping?
I do.
I do.
You want me to come down there,
I
Barry?
do.
Yeah, I can see it. I'm not sure why Barry.
Barry, maybe check your view of Zoom. Sometimes you have to expand or the way that you look at the features of that you look at.
Okay, go ahead. I'll play with it while you're talking.
Maybe go to full screen, Barry.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay.
You've only missed verbiage so far. I've got some good pictures coming up. Okay, so these are different layers you can build upon, which will help you make decisions, as I stated. So new GIS technology in the state of Delaware specific. The state of Delaware created First Map, and First Map is a portal where all the state agencies have said, we've collected all of this data, so let's share it and let's allow others to use it. And by others, that means a property owner, a developer, anybody can have access to First Map. So you can get on a screen and look at your property and look at anything that might affect your property of the data that they've collected. And then the county also has online services. So the county creates the parcels. So when you record your property or something changes to the property, it's recorded in the county, hosts the parcels and other online layers. What's great is if you want to know what's going on Route 1 outside the city limits before anybody else, they show all the projects online. It's accessible to everybody. You do not have to have a license. It's a user-friendly, free service. So it's come a long ways versus those of us that have been around a while, where we actually had Mylar maps and did a lot of tracing. And those that are attorneys, handwritten deeds and handwritten surveys that you had to try to read the handwriting. So now, why I'm talking about mapping a little more is the regulations have changed since your last CDP plan. So there's new regulations, which I'm going to go into as new mapping and resources. So why is mapping relevant to the text? Why can't we separate the text and do the map separately? Each one of your maps actually has to be entwined into the actual comprehensive plan itself. They have to be referenced. That is a law, just like the narrative. So reference in each chapter, and it provides a detailed breakdown of data. So you'll see when the draft is received, I have a map that shows several different colors for land use or zoning. Well, has anybody ever known how many acres you have of commercial or how many acres you have of residential? Do you know how many parcels you have of that data? GIS allows us to get that information. So when you're looking at housing, you know how many acres we have that actually has the housing zoning or the future land use. So these tools are really great. I can't say enough. I do not do GIS personally, but I know who can do it for me, and they're great tools to use. And remember, it's required by law to have your map match with you in your text plan. So they have to be in harmony together. So I thought I'd show you some examples of your map. On the left is the map that's currently in the plan. It's called the Parks and Rec Plan. And if you understand this document, that's exactly the way it looks. It wasn't expanded, it's exactly with the margins. So it's an image. This is an image of a map versus a map itself. If you look to the right, and I know the colors are a little hard and we haven't finalized this, but this is your new parks and open space. And it actually lets us put numbers on specific parcels. What is it? What is it titled? What is it colored? How many acres? So we can pull this data. So in your Parks and Rec open space chapter of your plan, I can say you have this many acres of open space, this many acres of parks, and the person that actually loves this the most is your city staff that writes grants, because you have to have it in your comprehensive plan. You have to show us how many acres or what you have. This is a great tool for us to be able to use for grants. It's a great tool for people to be able to market the city. It's a great tool for you to be able to see where you can expand or where you're lacking parks and open space. So it's a little different for Rehoboth because you don't have a lot of open space in the neighboring areas, but there are some areas that you could look for expansion if possible. You're pretty much built out. So I want to let you know these are the tools, and this is a great example of the difference in where we're at with technology, what we have for resources, and how these can be used to make further determinations. I do want to do the disclaimer, the data is only good as the resource it comes from. So if you look down at the bottom, and it's a little hard to see, where it says data sources, there's several different data sources that information's pulled from. There could be DENREC, there could be DELDOT, there could be the county, there could be the city, it could be national, it could be OSHA, it could be NOAA, all those fun acronyms. So that means they are the ownership and they represent the data set. They are the maintenance, the user of the utility, and the liability and responsibility is with them. You will always see a disclaimer on every map that it's not to a survey level, it's not to an engineering level. GIS is based on quadrants and parameters. So it's something, somebody cannot take this and manipulate the data to say, this says I'm 400 feet instead of 200 feet. So there are disclaimers on it. It's a tool to be able to use to get in the details with surveys. It is not to replace surveys or engineering or any legal documents such as deeds, plats, out of your map book and pages. So this is a really good example of the parks and open space. I'd like to show you one more because it'll show you kind of what we're doing. This was your map right in your plan. That's an image that's copied, and it was called your transit routes. So I see it just says bus stops and looks some kind of loop. So on the right-hand side, DELDOT has actually allowed us to use their data set just like you could or anybody. It's free. So we take all the bus stops that are new, and they have a star on them for the DART bus stops. And we actually took the route now we're doing for the Jolly Trolley. We got a PDF from them. So we're actually routing out the Jolly Trolley. And then eventually the water taxi, or where you can have the water areas to be able to do things. So this is great because now we see streets, we see boundaries, we see this is really important in our conversations. How can people come into your town and not park and not bring a vehicle? What other routes and alternatives do we have? And this map will be able to help everybody to determine that. And we can look at it and say, should we be having a DART stop outside of the avenue and outside of one? Should there be one by the lake? So there's a lot of things to be able to use this. So this is the first time that you've seen information like this because it's offered by others, but it has a large impact, positively or negatively, on where you grow and what you do with the city. So there's a lot that gets involved in these. Who do we get it from? All the different layers, and then how do we analyze the information? So while I'm letting you know this, I thought I'd let you know what your last plan had, which you know the maps that are in there, but these are required by state planning, and we actually split some out because they're easier to read. So in your last plan, you actually had 9 maps. In this plan, we're actually up to 13 because we want to show bike and pedestrian outside of bus stops. We want to get that detailed. We want these maps to be able to be readable. So I don't want somebody to take this map on the left and put it in their pocket and look for a bus stop. Or put it in their pocket and say, do we need a shelter here when it rains? Are they standing in front of the business and loitering in front of the business under the awning? Or should we look at a fun, nice, decorative, maybe Artive bus stop? So each one of these has been broken out with their legible, easier to read. Our format is 11 by 17. They can be printed on 8.5 by 11. So we want to think about the user and how the user can use them as well. Your last plan did not have any maps for sea level rise. That is a really huge, as we know, environmental concern for Rehoboth, as the Planning Commission has alluded to. So we have sea level rise, we have the coastal inundation maps, and these are recent. So this information is always evolving. And the hardest part of creating the map is it's good for that day, and it shows a snapshot in time, but something could change in the future. Some of these don't change as much. Your parks aren't changing every day. Your zoning is not changing every day. Sea level rise is not every day, but it is moving in different directions. So these are static maps at the time that can easily be updated at any time.
Debbie,
Yes.
can you go back?
Yep.
I'm sorry, but I don't think I know what coastal inundation is. Can you tell me?
Yes, so it's a flood map. So where your floodplain is and where the floodplain. So sea level rise is one thing, and flooding or back bay flooding or canal. Yep.
Okay.
And you'll see there's different levels on the map. So when you look at your home or the city, it's that. I hope that was good enough explanation.
Yeah, that is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So
Debbie, is that based on years, like 10-year inundation?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's pulled from a different source. So I'm going to be very honest with you, as we've talked in the past. Your last plan was very, and Barry, you alluded to this earlier, was very opinionated in several areas. And there's a lot of assumptions. And I think that works and that's good. But this planning commission actually has real factual data from sources that do that work, sources that track that, give funding for that. They determine flood insurance. They determine, several different things on it. So now you have factual data, which changes things completely on assumptions. Some people feel in 5 years, all of Rehoboth will be underwater. Some people feel in 5 years, only the first block. So this is scientific information, which we all have our own opinion on, but this is scientific information that is actually used to make decisions. And we're using the proper authorities that you have to in government, unless you're going to create your own systems. So I think you're going to find the reason why we wanted to talk about mapping.
Hey, Debbie,
Yes.
before we go ahead, why no redevelopment map?
So, good. That's a really good. Who asked that question? I can't see.
It's Lee.
Lee, very good question. So on the redevelopment, you know what? Let's see if I can pull it. Oh, I might mess it up. Your redevelopment map was the block of Rehoboth Beach Avenue. That's it. And it didn't have any colors. It didn't have any symbolic legend to it. 1 second. So I'll tell you what we did instead of that. I hate to do this and hold it up. That's old school. This is not modern technology at all, but this is old school. This was your redevelopment map. And if you look at it, it just has a blue line on the avenue in another place and doesn't tell you what you want to do, where you want to do it. So we took and included the future land use map because we haven't sat down with the Planning Commission and talked about potential redevelopment. Your mixed use would be redevelopment. So when you want to go to the mixed use, you look at these maps and you create a layer and you'd start saying, should we be going 2 blocks over from the avenue, 3 blocks over from the avenue? What's there now? What's the zoning now? So that becomes your redevelopment plan. The static map that's in there just draws a line around a box and it looks like it would be, my personal opinion is it looks like it was driven probably by Main Street because that's what it was. So I think it was probably helping Main Street redevelopment.
Wouldn't there be a map with things like the Bellhaven, the proposed hotel at State Road and Rehoboth Avenue, and maybe Clear Space and Beach Walk and
So those are underway, and that's a layer. It's not required at a comprehensive plan, but those are, if we could capture, when you look at mixed use zoning or anytime, the city could capture on a layer all applications that have been presented the last 10 years and create a layer. But we don't have, that's not a requirement for a state plan. It's called redevelopment because you've already approved them or they're underway.
Okay.
Yeah. However, I've been talking to Max, and Max has started creating some layers that we're going to work with him on that will be great tools. Maybe you want to find out where your building permits have been issued, where the trends are. It's great because when you look at some of the newer houses that maybe are a block off the avenue, just to speak, locally, you look at a lot that were torn down or redone and went larger. So when you started seeing 2 and 3 homes there get developed, you can see the trend of that whole street is almost redeveloped. So the layer of the building permits, I think, is great. Business licensing is great, and redevelopment. So I would like to work with Max on having that. If we have time to get in the CDP, that would be great, but you'll have that as a tool because Max will have the basic layers to build on. So that's a great idea. But
Debbie, if we want to recommend in the CDP that certain blocks be redeveloped, like Wilmington and Baltimore, won't that be in the CDP?
Well, you would put redevelopment, but I would have to say, why did we just pick those blocks? What analogy and what data did we use to just assume that?
I just use that as an example.
Oh, yes, yep. So what this CDP plan is going to do is give you data to look at the land use, to look at the zoning when you go to make those redevelopment areas known for your implementation. Because right now, we haven't had any conversations about rezoning or redevelopment because this is the first time you're going to have the data. So one of the implementation items you have that you guys had us put in there was mixed use redevelopment, where you want to pursue that and look and see what would be the right areas. You would use these maps to help you during that implementation project. But as far as targeting redevelopment, if we wanted to go through and say, this is exactly where we want it, then that needs to go in front of the public forum. We would have to have workshops on why we picked that, how we picked it. And you're just now getting the data for supporting some recommendations.
But keep in mind, I mean, there were definitely some data points from the surveys that we include. So that could be included in this too. So Steve, to your point, I mean, it's not that we don't have any data. We have some data from the surveys around Baltimore and Wilmington and some infrastructure areas in particular that they referenced and asked for improvements in.
Well, I anticipated, for example, a menu in the CDP for the commissioners of potential areas where they could have redevelopment, and I think that it would be good for us.
Sure.
To put something in there like that, which doesn't say that they need to do it, but these are possible areas for example, mixed use or redevelopment, so that there'd be a record for this group of commissioners and the next group. I mean, it's a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
So
in order to do, and Mike, I'm going to rely on you to chime in. In order to do that, in order for you to take a map and say, we think this needs to be redeveloped, we would look at why was this area chosen? Do we have water? Do we have sewer? Do we have land use? And to do that, you would have public hearings and you would have people in because you're talking about land use. And land use is the caveat to following with zoning. So the Planning Commission hasn't had any land use change discussions other than you're pursuing mixed use, and you have to take time as a one-off project to be able to look at what you want to do mixed use. I wouldn't feel comfortable even as your planner to say it needs to be 2 blocks off, because I would want to first ask, where is all the mixed use now? Let's map all the mixed use now that's there. And then what makes sense with parking? So you'd look at all these tools as an implementation project after you adopt the CDP to make that more specific. So I think we can talk about that once you see the maps and maybe you read the text and your recommendations, see if you want to go in that direction, but that would involve public input, workshops, and specific properties that we would need to let people know we're thinking about. We can talk in general, I think, with the survey stuff.
Debbie, I think that what everyone's leading up to, those are really aspirational issues.
Yes.
and that I agree with the approach that you want to take is it sets the framework in the comprehensive plan. And then the next phase is when the comprehensive plan is implemented because of those aspirations, then it gets down into the brass tacks of where, why, how, when, and what we should do. And so I think that separation as you're going right now is the way to go.
And it'll be a high level. So we aren't ignoring any redevelopment recommendations. We aren't ignoring the mixed use areas or the input that was gathered or where infrastructure could be done. That is all in the plan, and that's in how we kind of broke down the plan a little bit, but it doesn't specifically go on a map where we drew a line. And that'll help the planning commission figure out what to do on the next step.
Well, most comprehensive development plans that I've seen specifically have a redevelopment section with areas designated as areas that the city is encouraging or the county or whatever it happens to be is encouraging redevelopment, down to specific parcels and even maybe some general guidance as to what they would like to see there.
And I agree with that. And most master plans have an existing land use plan and a potential proposed land use plan.
Rehoboth does not have an existing land use map. They have not inventoried. So that if we want to change the scope of this project and do an existing inventory, so the towns that have had redevelopment areas noted have been through the public process with public input, drawn the lines on the map, and have supportive data or initiatives to make those decisions. This is the first time that the city actually has this level of data and tools and mapping to be able to move to that direction.
Let me just continue for a second. We can either do this now and have those public hearings as part of this process, or if we adopt a comprehensive development plan, then the whole city and the planning commission and the commissioners will have to go through that whole process individually again.
Not necessarily. No, it's an amendment, Steve. In Delaware, there's an amendment for a comprehensive plan for your map. So if you wanted to create a new map, it's a 90-day process. But the reason we cannot go back is you are looking, when I am allowed to finish this presentation, we're actually going to ask for another extension now because of mapping. If we are having meetings where we're talking about people's properties and talking about the land use designation we're going to put on them, then they have to be involved. They have to be notified, because the next step in 18 months by law is you automatically have to zone their properties accordingly. So this plan has good and bad parts to it. The good part is your old plan, none of this could be used for decision making. The data that's in there wasn't supportive tables and data to the level you're at today. Not that anybody did it wrong. The information wasn't available, or it wasn't required by the state at the time. So this is the first time you're actually seeing all of this information to make educated decisions. And I mean, it's something we can talk about, I think, Rick, at a later date if you want, but we're capturing the higher level and identifying areas in the text that we've had discussions on, or that we have had survey results on, but we're not being so definitive to say, we want Baltimore or we want Wilmington, because that hasn't been discussed or presented or talked about the hows and whys. And that does require additional process, which is an amendment to your plan, but we will be laying down the higher level. So the adjustment would be to the map and minor to the text. And those do happen a lot.
Yeah, I think where the concern is coming from, Debbie, is that we did the Rehoboth Avenue streetscape.
Yep.
And that project, was done and completed. Wilmington Ave and Baltimore Ave have been talked about for years now, as you know, and even the Board of Commissioners, not just the Planning Commission, have talked about the need to redevelop those. And yes, they are probably prime areas for mixed use overlay, which definitely needs to be considered. But I think from my standpoint as well, and Mike mentioned that these are aspirational, but I think that this Planning Commission had in mind while they may be aspirational, we want to be sure that, to put it bluntly, they have some teeth as aspirations, and that the Board of Commissioners needs to consider these things. And maybe that's just part of the implementation process, but I think we're looking for some more specificity and some greater requirement that these matters be addressed and accomplished. I don't know if I'm stating that correctly for the rest of the Planning Commission, but I sense that that's at least part of where the concern here is emanating.
Yeah, I feel that there needs to be some text in the CDP that brings the attention to these things. Doesn't particularly state what property should be done, but that the should be there, and there should be a text. There should be some text in the CDP that basically gives them this alternative if they want to implement.
As I alluded to, it is in the text. As once again, I'm going to state all the survey data information and recommendations, the recommendations that we have are in there. So it does say further investigate mixed use development district, assess existing land use to determine, assess parking to determine, assess infrastructure. So when you talk about saying you want to go to a mixed use district, I understand that. I've written several of them, I've implemented several of them, but to get to that level, you have to look at existing infrastructure. What if you want overhead wires, you want to put them underneath. You look at amenities on the street, you look at parking, you look at right of way on the street, existing uses, trash delivery. So you take all these into consideration before you just color the map mixed use. And it's a process, and it's very honed in to specific areas. So it is a very specific planning project. It's almost like a neighborhood planning project for those that are familiar with that term. And that,
Debbie,
that's
I understand. Debbie, I understand that. That would be an amendment, which is a detailed sector plan that goes through all of those things, which would go through its own process. But I think I hear you say you're going to give us I just want to be clear. You're going to give us these maps with the text, I mean, with the data, but there will be text that does say you need to explore these things.
Absolutely, it's in your goals. Yes, correct.
All right, if that's what we're talking about, let's, I'll hold and see when I get it, and I review it, and if I have recommendations, I'll give them to you.
Can I jump in there too? Because I want to make sure when you say there'll be language in there, will there be actual language that says Wilmington Avenue and Baltimore Avenue?
So it will say surveys and data.
Otherwise, it's not helpful. I'm just saying that. I mean, and if we're asking for extra time to do the CDP, then maybe we should think about exploring this a little deeper. I was on the commission from 11 to 14, and we talked about it, and it's 7 years later. Just that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Joyce.
I agree with Rick and also with Mark that it's been talked about. Not just, I'm not talking about mixed use, but just an overall view. The topic that I recall from what Mark's saying and also Rick, we talked about how do you get the people to move from Rehoboth Avenue over to Wilmington and to Baltimore, and there were talks of cut through and all the signs and different things. These don't take amendments or special hearings or maps or anything, but they're talking about an attitude. How do we get more of a universal flow through those 3 main streets up there? And I think it's a very valid question. I don't know where it is in the CDP the last time, but I'm sure it's in the 2015 review, because that came up again as Mark was saying. So I think we need to know those streets.
I agree. I'm not talking mixed use, so I know.
Right, I'm not talking mixed use. I'm talking about the attitude that you're talking about.
So that's good. I just want to make sure.
I think Debbie's said that it's covered in the narrative text that we're going to be getting, and that needs to tie in with the maps and everything. So I just wanted to. I think we all just wanted to be sure and make it clear that those things are being covered, since we haven't seen the text yet. And so I think it's this discussion is better had when we can put all the pieces together finally.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So I'll just reiterate again that when the survey came out and you guys have said Wilmington and Baltimore, it says in there in general areas to consider, but it doesn't include or eliminate everybody else. It just says areas to consider. We received the following comments. So we heard people, we've been talking about it, and there was areas identified by different people. So we do put that in there, but we don't quantify it to a map, which is what we're talking about now.
Got it. Okay.
That help everybody a little bit more on if we put down the sectors of it, then people come back and say, why wasn't my block in it? Why wasn't my parcel in it? I don't want to be in it. And you can work all that through at a public hearing. But I think you'll be happy with the goal. Remember, a mixed use research and development and considerations was one of your goals that we went over before. So that it's in a goal. It wasn't in a goal of your last plan. It was mentioned, but it wasn't a goal. So now it's a goal, so it's elevated. So I hope it'll get the attention it deserves with the priority level that you want.
And it will be up to future planning commissions to ensure that it is addressed.
Yes, it is at your implementation. Yep. But I definitely can guarantee you that anything that was talked about redevelopment or new development or infrastructure, like lack of infrastructure, that is all mentioned in the appropriate chapter. Not just by language, but in your goals. Because the goals to me has the most weight in a comprehensive plan versus the data, the supportive data. We're giving you enough tools to move forward with your goals, put it that way. Okay, so the next one is the delay in schedule. Why? So when we started this process, and we've alluded to this before, how many changes we've had in our scope, how many changes we've had in our schedule, how many times we've reset. All of your maps were done in mid-2018. We started this project. You've seen 2 in our presentations. So we pulled them up on the screen and we showed you sea level rise when sea level rise was presented and talked about. So we finished up that task in 2018. What recently came about was I actually have a new mapping person. I said, can we make these better? Can the streets be readable? I don't want to put my bifocals on. Can a restaurant owner or an attorney or a beauty shop or a Main Street, can they use these maps for something else? So she just redesigned them to make it more about the town and less about your outside boundaries. That's what we really care about, other than the growth area. So we just found, I said, I want you to go through every data set, which is several of them, hundreds of them, and pull up the most recent data. And let's give the Planning Commission 2020 if we can. So the state strategies for the state of Delaware was just approved in July. It had no adverse effects in Rehoboth as far as level 1 and level 2, but we just got that map this month, which is great because now we have current information dated September 2020 in your plan. So we have other ones like that we're coordinating with all the state agencies in the county, because when they have the data set and when they publish it for use, there's a delay sometimes. Some state agencies publish their data quarterly. Some do live. The state wants them to do live. Some do annual. So now we're contacting the state agencies in the county to say, do we have the most recent data? We don't want them to have to start over again. We want you to be able to use this to implement your plan. So that opened up a little bit more than I thought, but I don't feel comfortable giving old maps. And in talking to Rick and Jeff, we don't want to use old data. So we're coordinating that and getting that information. They've been very receptive, and we're working with different levels of government to help out. And then we're analyzing it to make sure everything matches up. So if I had if I had the map from the state strategies in 2015 when it was done, and it was done today, I want to see the differences. So now I just got a brand new map set. I already wrote the chapter on state strategies in 2015. What has changed in 2020? So we're just overlaying those, and the mapping person's saying it changed in 4 areas. So we can see if that's going to have a local impact on you or not. I think that's an important step, and we think that information will help us say what's truly changed, and then I can ad-lib some verbiage in the text to support it. So based on that analysis for the potential local impacts, we need more time because of the complexity of the data sets and the volume of information. I can't even tell you how many data sets get correlated into maps. So right now we have contacted the organizations that we need to work with for coordination. And we've actually found a couple areas that we want to talk to them about potential discrepancies or not. And we want to work through those. So I'm waiting on scheduling where we can sit down with them or talk to them before we would release data that wouldn't match up to the other data sets. I'm unsure about the schedule on that. So when we talk about the delay of that, right now, I want to be honest with you, we can take our data sets that we have right now that we created in 2018, and you can pass the state. You can get through the state. They don't look at every single parcel like we're going to locally. They're going to say, you got this from this resource, and you check, you met the box. That will not help you, as you were alluding to, Steve, when you go to mixed use, old data is not going to help at all. If you don't have the current information on the future land use or the zoning or the parcels or sea level rise or source water protection, all of that is not going to help you with those blocks that you guys want to look at. So, you know, we were kind of thinking, we didn't scope to do this, this analysis. We have some new staff in here that is rotational engineers that on our company learn more than they charge. So we have them analyzing all the data and we QC it. So we think it's a good time to make sure you have all the right information and can move forward in your implementation. So what that does is for us to finalize the mapping analysis, I have several agencies that we literally just called yesterday and today to get this additional information. And, you know, the person, I'm just going to allude to Mike a little bit because we have some of the same nature. I'm exporting data. It doesn't take a lot of period of time, but to analyze it and then to research any kind of inconsistencies, we need some time with. So I'm anticipating that we'd have an update at your next meeting, which Rick will allude to, which means we'd have to ask for an extension from the state. I had an informal conversation with the state, and of course, they always prefer current information. And the longer your comprehensive plan goes on, the older the information gets. So I alluded that we are not postponing to rewrite the comp plan, to go into public hearings, to do several, open ourselves up to workshops with COVID, like we tried to do. What we're trying to do is get the most recent data set so I can give you proper verbiage to match up to your goals when you're going through your goals to consider. So we're laying this up so you can be able to use that information. So nothing's changing in the process itself. We're just unsure of when that internal draft release would be given. And I will know more once I get the final calls from DENREC, Sussex County, and DelDOT, hopefully by the end of next week.
So how long of an extension are you looking for?
I can't answer that until I get the results from the other people. So if I hear from DENREC, and they've got over 100 data sets, if I hear from them that they've got several old, and that's what we have to use, then we're good with our maps we have for that layer. If they have new data sets and they can give them the most recent, exporting them is not the problem. I just need the staff to analyze them, and then we have to QA/QC it for liability. So I will know more next week, the early part of the week after that, because it's state and county responding. I will know more then, and I think we'll be comfortable in seeing, hopefully targeting, be able to get a response on a new schedule by October 2nd. In talking to Rick and Jeff, we can't ask for an extension letter unless we give a definitive approval date. So we have to give this schedule to them to ask for the extension.
And
yes, in all likelihood, we'll be, discussing how long a period extension we're going to be requesting at the October 9th regular meeting, because Debbie, I believe that the request for an extension has to be filed by the end of October, correct?
Yes, they're requesting that they have that. So then, because you're not due until next year. So they're requesting to have it for consideration in October.
So that all will affect the time that you give us the draft to look at. So are we a month away, or do we have any sense of how far we're away?
Once again, I already explained that I wouldn't be able to give that because I'm waiting on other agencies. And I'm trying to show the urgency to them, but it's, when you call DENREC, there's 15 different divisions I got to talk to. So I've made those in the past 2 days, like literally that's all we've been doing, which isn't part of our scope. So we jumped on this right away, met with Jeff, met with Rick, and kind of jumped on it to get the information. So I'm waiting on others, and I explain the urgency, and I explain we're gonna have to ask for an extension. It's a request for us, for them to give us the most current information, and they're trying to work on some of it. So
So are there,
like Rick alluded to, I will be able to hopefully give something I feel comfortable about October 9th update.
are there some parts of the draft that could go for us to look at, to begin to look at?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Can we still just have kind of a constant stream of kind of the chapters coming at us?
So when you get this data, all of the data goes into each chapter. So I will be going back and then rewriting some sections, because now we have this mapping data. We have some generalities in there. We've done a lot of writing. We were scheduled to write, we worked last Saturday, we worked part of Monday, we worked Tuesday, Wednesday on this mapping. That was all scheduled for writing. And when you're writing for 100 hours, that's a lot of time lost. So we're not going to release the document at this time in chapters, because you are not going to have all of the data, and you'll reread it again, and I'll have to write it based on what I get from this mapping information. So the mapping information, like I talked about, acres, parcels, is very critical to each chapter. It goes into housing, economic development, infrastructure. It affects every one of those chapters you wrote your goals in. So we're going to have to ask to be patient until we get that. But what I can reassure you on, and this is what Rick and Jeff, if you wanted to say anything, we have not changed or shortened the review time for the Planning Commission or for the public. So the extension would be how long it takes to get this mapping analyzed and then written into the document. And then we start right back to where we were, where it says internal draft release. And the schedule would go back on track, where nobody's getting shorted on review time or comfortable time or public review time at all.
Obviously, this is a delay, but I do think it's important when we turn out this CDP that it have a sound foundation of the most current information that is available at the time that we release it. I was uncomfortable from the get-go back in 2018, that we weren't going to be able to, have census data, and we're still not going to have the 2020 census, and that's unfortunate, but that's totally out of our control. This is something where Debbie and her colleagues can now go and just as the state just released this month their state strategies. We should confirm that we have everything that is the most current information for the mapping, so that the city has something reliable to work with on a going forward basis to implement the CDP that we develop. I'm hoping the delay isn't going to be a long delay, and I, in some respects, I see the request for an extension as just a safety net, and hope that it turns out to be just that.
Okay. So Rick, will we still have a special meeting on the 25th of September?
Probably not. I was going to talk about that later when we get to a discussion of future meetings.
Okay.
My inclination is to leave those on the city calendar for the moment, and address those on a case-by-case basis as we get additional updates from Debbie, and as the commission knows, Jeff and I are in constant contact with Debbie and talk at least once a week. So we'll be able to make some assessments on whether or not we're going to need those, or perhaps need them for other purposes.
Okay.
Debbie, you want to proceed, or
yes?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Rick, can
Yes.
I'm just going to ask another question around this. It's kind of an awkward question, so I'm just going to ask it. With obviously the change that'll be coming place in September as it relates to, a new mayor and new commissioners, I don't know if there will be changes on our committee, our commission, or not. But if there is a change that comes about on our commission, I mean, I think we all received, right, a note from Stan about our interest in staying on this commission. I almost feel like there was a bit of a restart that might also take place. What is the thinking here of the group on that? And
can I lead as a consultant on that?
I just don't want to lose time. That's all.
I just want to respond as a consultant, if I can quickly. This boards and commissions change all the time on projects that are more than a year, all the time. I've never worked sometimes with a board through a whole project. If we have a reset, it would be our 5th in our contract. And I would be meeting with whoever the chair is and the mayor and the council, because we're not continuing to move forward. So as people change, the people that are off of a board have the opportunity to still participate. And oh my gosh, I hope they still do. The people that come on a board, I hope can get caught up to speed and see where we're at or offer that. But the project by law has to keep moving forward no matter what the election cycles are for whatever level they are. So because we are under an extension, I would then go, if we have a reset, or if there's if all of a sudden there's 4 new planning commission members and they say, we don't want to do anything this other group did, I would then sit there and say, what do you want us to do? Because you're about at 80% getting ready to release the document. You need to contact the state planning and say, we want to start over again. And then we would literally start from ground zero with the scope, a schedule change, and how do people want to proceed. So from a consulting aspect, I have been working with boards all the time that come off, go off, come on. And it's happened right with this board specifically as of last year. So we could, I don't know the politics and who gets promoted or who gets what, but the project should still be moving forward as a consultant perspective. And then I'll let you, Rick, sorry about that. I just thought I'd say a consultant perspective.
Well, obviously, we know that there, is the possibility of changes on the composition of the Planning Commission as early as next Friday. I don't know what the mayor-elect's plans are with respect to appointments or reappointments. And my hope would be that, whether I'm here or somebody else is sitting in the chair, that person will continue, to push forward with what I believe is a good schedule, and the product that we have produced thus far, I think is a good product, maybe better than good, and that in the last year alone, we have accomplished so much in gathering data and public input that, I don't think is really going to change. I mean, the public input is what it is. And, a lot of time and a lot of things have changed since 2010. And, we've updated, the community input. We've gotten more than most other communities do in their process. And a lot of that is thanks to Debbie and her colleagues, efforts, as well as, the incredible participation that this Planning Commission has put into this. And, I think you're all to be commended for, for working through all of this and helping during difficult times as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I would just hope that this will continue to proceed forward on a good pace and follow, the direction that we have been pursuing.
And the other one, sorry, Rick, again, was Rick feels, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Rick, do you and Jeff feel a little more comfortable because you actually saw the layout of a chapter or two and where we were moving forward and what we've done? And I think the Planning Commission hasn't seen anything. So one opportunity may be at the October 9th meeting. I maybe run through 1 or 2 chapters and show the format, if that would be a little bit better.
Yeah, I think, Debbie, we should consider doing that, because I think that the members would get more comfortable with what they're going to see as a product when you are prepared to release it for the internal review. Yeah, obviously feel more comfortable. I'm sure, Jeff, I don't want to put words in your mouth either, but I mean, I think when you and I both saw those in our discussion with Debbie last week, we were feeling good about what was there.
Yeah, I I agree with Debbie and Rick's perspective. We're all new to the Planning Commission at some point in time. I was new, and I can remember that feeling. And every planning commissioner, some I knew, some I didn't know, all shared their time with me. There's a mentoring process going on, and it still goes on. There's one-on-one conversations when people, admit maybe privately they want to understand something a little bit better. And we'll continue that. I think that's the spirit of the city to help everybody succeed. And the project has, it's had its slowdown periods, but it's continuously moved ahead. And I know we will get to the finish line.
I think that would be very helpful also to just get some sense of what a chapter might look like.
I'll work with Jeff and Rick on that. Maybe we take them through, how I showed you the community output, how we lined it up with the goals and everything. I think that would be a good demonstration, and I can work with you guys on a date, potentially October 9th if you want.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have any comments? Questions? Okay, I guess, Debbie, did you have anything further, or are we done here?
I am going to try to get back to writing and mapping.
Okay, that's what we need you to do.
Thank you, and I do appreciate it. This wasn't something that we wanted to do and get pulled away from and do, but I think once you see once you allow me to do the job and write, I think you'll feel comfortable that, like what Rick and Jeff saw as a product and what our thought process was and how we've written several others that would help you with our experience.
I think it will be time well spent, Debbie.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
I'm going to leave. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Before we move on, any further discussion from the commissioners on this matter? Okay. The next matter of business is an executive session to receive legal advice and opinion from the city solicitor regarding potential litigation relating to the Planning Commission's approval of the site plan application number 0620-03 Clear Space Theater and site plan application number 0620-03 Rehoboth Spotlight as permitted by 29 Delaware Code section 10004 B4. And so Max, if you could take the time now to ensure that members of the public are not participating or viewing or hearing the executive session.
Rick, I just want to thank you for your leadership this year. Hope that you will
Chairman,
do it.
we're live.
Anyway, I want to thank you for that. And terrific.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm proud to have served with all of you, and I think
Gentlemen,
this commission's done a great job.
gentlemen, we're live.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going back to our agenda, there is no new business. Under other business, we have the building inspector's report. I believe everyone has received that. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Molina, or Mr. Molina, do you want to add anything? Dom, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Me? Okay.
Dom, do you have any comments to make on the inspector's report?
Yeah, I just want to make I want to bring to the attention of the planning commission that despite the COVID-19 and situation we're facing in doing our duties here at the department, I want to commend my staff, because we are looking at this report, we have exceeded our operating costs for the department and well ahead to other incomes fees that we're generating to cover the costs for other losses in the city. So basically we're about, I would say about 20 to 25% over our operating budget.
Dom, I think you said operating costs. You meant to say operating profit.
Well, the fees have exceeded our cost of operation. So we're about 20, 25% over. And I want to commend my staff for putting the effort into this.
That's good news, for the city, certainly, and I'm sure that your staff has been very busy despite the COVID pandemic.
And looking at your data, Dom, it looks like that's the good news. The bad news is it looks like it's being generated from a significant number of demolitions in the city.
I would say about you have mostly residential, yes, and I agree with you. Got $111,000 that's been generated out of demolition. That's an unfortunate situation about that.
I have to say, why is it unfortunate?
Well, it's from my perspective, not necessarily others, but we're not looking at doing a lot of the preservation.
The big problem is it's not green demolition either. It's environmentally disastrous.
I agree with that, but I think the fact that we're growing and that some of these houses I've seen being torn down, they probably need to be torn down. The house that I built, I had a house here was built in 1930, and we had to have hazmat people come in and to tear it down because of all the asbestos and the lead and everything else. So it's not a house I want to live in. So I don't think necessarily tearing a house down is a bad thing. I just want to make that observation.
I guess a lot depends on what it's replaced with. So
I'm finished with my report.
Okay, thank you, Dom. City Solicitor report. Anything further for us?
No, well, I guess I could mention that the Board of Commissioners, I understand on the 18th, is going to reboot the gross floor area discussion they've been having and start to dive into it. I saw a draft of the agenda, and I think it's being split out now so that subsurface parking is going to be one issue, and then a separate ordinance will be gross floor area more generally. But that's coming back on the 18th.
Hey, Glenn, why is it that, when you read things about the floor area from citizens, of people that talk about all this additional floor area that's going to occur if it's approved, yet it's been the common practice for years to not count decks in floor area?
Well, the intention of the ordinance, what we've been working on, is to maintain the status quo. So
yeah,
when I hear people say this is an effort to allow for increased floor area, it's not at all. Not from my perspective. from my perspective, it's been simply an effort to ensure that the status quo is maintained. The Board of Adjustment decision kind of called into question what should be included and not included in gross floor area. And the Board of Commissioners direction to us was draft an ordinance that maintains the status quo. That has proven to be a lot more difficult than but there's no intent, certainly not any intent that's ever been disclosed to me to provide additional floor area.
Glenn, is that Paul's last meeting as mayor? And what would they be doing? Adopting the draft to go to public hearing? Is that what we're talking about?
They're not that far along yet. So this will be the organizational meeting when Mayor-elect Mills is seated. So it'll be Mayor-elect Mills and the new commissioners basically giving, I think, an introduction to the topic. And yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for the city solicitor?
Hi, I do.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I've been out of town, so I just might have missed this, but before I left, I saw the announcement that Agave was not moving forward. So I wondered if we knew what the situation was there, or if it ran into a legal issue, or any thoughts?
Well, I can give you some of the details that we're aware of. Other things are speculative, and I don't want to create.
That's fine.
What we know happened is that Agave poured footers, and Don, you might need to help out if I misstate anything, but our understanding is that an engineer came to do the analysis as whether the footers were appropriate for the proposed structure, and the engineer's analysis was that those footers would not support the building that had been designed, so they had to ultimately consider a redesign. Then COVID hit, and I'm not sure how that impacted the project, but ultimately they did decide not to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know how many more of these I'll be sitting in, but as the long-awaited code discussion from many different places, from here, from the commission, there is I know many of you know this, but there is a rumbling here of people that this tightening down and preserving something that was 80 years ago, and it is not today, is going to cost this city. We scream and yell about not becoming Dewey or not becoming something, but people like Agave, I'm in this restaurant group as well. Footers, yes, but it was quite a fight for them. It was a tremendous fight for me to try to build a house on a pretty good, decent piece of land where I had a pool already, and forced me out of town. I mean, so this is not the first large group or people that have been here, like Nicola, that are considering significant moves to other towns. It's big, and everybody seems to think, and if this the theater goes down, we're going to see a mass exodus here. I mean, just telling you, business people, it is not business friendly, and there is a way to be business friendly, resident friendly, and tourist friendly. It has not hit the mark. Just with the Baltimore Washington Avenue 7-year discussion, the all those kind of pieces. So we all know it's nothing new. Everybody dances around it, but there are some significant names that will be mistakes.
Okay.
And we all have to do something about it. I'm just trying to give you that, because despite us, we will be a small house community with very few people. So, there you go.
Well, thank you, Mark. Let's move on to discussion of possible agenda items for our regular meeting scheduled for October 9th. I guess we've already talked about Debbie coming back at least by that date with an updated status report on progress on the CDP and the mapping, and perhaps even a better handle on timing of future steps. Little difficult from my perspective to say what ought to be on the October 9th agenda, as there may be, by that point in time, in all likelihood, some new people appointed. But are there any things that the members feel should be included on that agenda, recommendations that you want to make at this point?
Rick, maybe a further discussion about what Mark just talked about.
Okay.
A discussion of some major retailers that are leaving the city, and the planning commission trying to figure out why and if there's anything that can be done about it.
Okay.
Does that make sense to anybody else, or?
I think that's a fair discussion.
I do. I agree. I mean, I just go back to the surveys that we all poured over, hundreds of pages, and there's, a lot of great feedback there that we need to act on as a city. I'm hoping we can be influential to pull this together so that we can have a thriving town. It's worrisome to me, very worrisome.
I guess we can put a discussion item on the agenda and for that, and we can fine tune the wording. Joyce, you need to unmute yourself.
How do we have a discussion unless we have the people come in and talk to us? I mean, we need some facts. I agree with it. I mean, I just don't know what we can talk about unless somebody has data of why people have been leaving.
Well,
we can have a sort of a philosophical discussion, but we don't really know what the sources are unless somebody like Mark, who's in business there, he may be able to get some people to come talk.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, Joyce. I agree with you. I mean, we want to.
Otherwise, we're just sitting talking,
right,
and not knowing. It's I heard or you heard or whatever.
Well, Joyce, that's kind of what I meant is kind of having maybe a bigger conversation of like what we're doing now, like coming up with a game plan on how do we approach.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's worthwhile. I agree with you.
We talked to the Caggianos and asked them whether they'd be willing to frank discuss what drove their decision, or not. Maybe they don't want to talk about it, but
I think they will. I've actually spoken to them because I love Nicole Pizza.
I agree, it's a legitimate issue, and I'd like to have it on the agenda.
Yeah, I think by putting it on the agenda for general discussion purposes, and perhaps then coming to some plan as to how to address it as a planning commission moving forward. Maybe having a session in the future where people are invited in to provide input, and the fact that it'll be a public meeting, people can sign up and they can participate in the discussion and perhaps provide some input. I think opening up the discussion is an important thing to do.
But in the CDP, we could even talk about it in the economic development chapter about how the city can be both business friendly and residential friendly, and encourage, because we're not going to have residents if we don't have a downtown.
That's very true.
I agree.
It's the thing that worries me is that the problem is exacerbated by the impact of the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely.
And we are not yet able to assess just how many businesses, retail and restaurants we're going to lose by the end of this season. And we need to have a vibrant economic downtown to help support the city. And to provide our residents with, places to shop and eat, and to provide tax revenue. And so, I mean, it's a very important discussion to have, and it does play into the CDP. Any other topics you feel should be added to that agenda at this point?
So are we meeting on the 20, whatever?
No, the 25th. Well, I was going to bring that up next, Joyce. We have, I was going to ask about attendance conflicts. September 25th is a virtual special meeting that's on the city's calendar, as well as October 2nd. It does not look like we're really going to be devoting either of those to the CDP as we had originally anticipated. So like your thoughts on whether or not we keep them on the calendar in case the Planning Commission needs them. And as I mentioned earlier, as we get closer to those dates, decide whether or not to cancel.
That makes sense to me. I mean, Debbie's sending us some stuff too, right? About
yeah, she will be.
That's something we could discuss perhaps. So I'd keep it on. Need to meet and then you can cancel it.
I mean, to me, that makes sense. I mean, it preserves our space. And I guess, you know, if you have another committee, for example, coming in and wanting to, you know, set up a meeting time, you know, you can contact either Jeff or myself or, you know, someone else in the, you know, depending upon composition, as to whether or not we want to relinquish a date.
Okay.
Ahead of time. If that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, and do we have any applications that have been submitted?
Actually, I received a phone call from an attorney today.
Oh.
And they're going to be submitting, most likely today, a partitioning application for Columbia Avenue.
The whole avenue?
Yeah, the whole entire avenue.
Okay.
I think the address is 46 Columbia Avenue.
Okay. Well, you know, we'll have to be scheduled for consideration at the appropriate meeting. Thank you, Ann. If there's nothing else from any of the commissioners, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.